It all comes from a place of love. It all comes from a place of love, and so it always should. It's a football club. It should all come from a place of love. That is the lovely thing about supporting a team. It's the community, the sense of community. So it was nice of the head coach to remind me of that today. That key line, I think, from his pre-match presser, today's press conference. I thought it was a great press conference from the manager. Some of you might have hated it and think it proved that he's not fit for the job. I found it quite exciting actually, because it was controlled. It was very articulate. It was a slight dialing back as well as an underlining, an underscoring of what he was talking about at the weekend, and what some people have characterised as an outburst on air. But I think it was, as I was staying in Jersnet last night, I think it was a controlled explosion. But yeah, it all comes from a place of love. And I think maybe that's why a few Rangers supporters don't like Russell Martin, because you know, he's got a reputation as having kind of esoteric or maybe even left of centre inclinations. It's a guy who played championship football most of his career. He's hard as nails, obviously. But I think most people are just worried that he doesn't have the tactical nous. He's got the tactical template for Rangers. So I had concerns about that myself when he first took the job. I'm just willing to give him more of a chance. And I said it was on Jersnet last night because it's like, it all comes from a place of he's gutting out the Rangers players. And so he's publicly lambasting them because we're family, and you do that. Sometimes you have to have a go at family members because you want the best for them. Sometimes we just take it out on each other. I was going more in the kind of taking it out on each other angle last night on Jersnet when I was saying something that was there was certain Rangers supporters that wanted us all to go back to the 1970s politically, so that's why they didn't like Russell Martin. Don't take me seriously. I'm sorry if that offended anybody. I mean, I think when you see the anti-woke stuff and all that, it's just that kind of wee minority pocket Rangers fans I was talking about. I'm the Chris Sutton of Jersnet. Frankie just gets me on to wind folk up to be a controversialist. You know what Jersnet's like? It's toxic. It really isn't. So I'm just daft, just mouthing up because I'm just comfortable talking to other Rangers fans, and you say things that you maybe wouldn't if you weren't as in love with the whole damn support and club and everything, good or bad. And I will be one of those bad things that I hope you can remain in love with. How you doing, folks? This is your fat. He's gone. He's gone. He's gone too early, Jim. He's gone too early with the lambasting of the players, and he'll be gone too early. He'll be gone early if it doesn't work, if we don't have a massive win against Victoria Plzen. Preview pod coming to you in association with Jersnet. Check out Jersnet, the latest Jersnet podcast, 9:30 on Sunday. It was the flagship show. It's still there on all platforms, all Jersnet platforms, but it's YouTube I mostly operate on. And Ben and Rob doing a fantastic job, but unfortunately they had me on as a guest. And I was just talking, well, if you're on here, you know how I talk. I'm sponsored by that, and I'm also sponsored by Storm Florist. Storm Florist, which when you're getting 4 named storms a month now with the global warming, and my house is up a kind of hill, a kind of a raised bit, if you like. It's not a castle on the top of a hill. Just there's a whole lot of houses going up this various roads, and I'm on the top road. Yeah, and I'm in the front bedroom the day. I was telling you, Storm Owen back in January, the really big one, it had knocked the cap off the chimney stack, and it fell on my slates, and I had to wait ages to get the insurance to cover it, and then the guys to come out and do the job, and meanwhile there's water coming in my roof and all that. It was the same for people all over the country after that storm, but I thought the day I heard a bit of slate moving, so I spent my lunchtime standing across the road opposite my house, staring up at my roof with glasses through binoculars, so that the neighbours would think I was trying to spy on folk in their bedrooms or whatever. That was my life. So I'm getting kind of sick of the storm stuff. I couldn't see anything. Maybe it's just a bit of something. But yeah, this is just like Rangers though. It's just like Rangers. You're the top of the hill. You're the kings of the hill. You're up high. There might be somebody just slightly above you, and that's really irritating. And there's a house across the road that is slightly above us. But you've got to take on most of the blasts because there's nothing to protect you because you're so isolated up the top there. You've got to take it. It's just part and parcel. It's just part and parcel of being at the top. And I thought that was great. My analogies are going to be as kind of complex and maybe poor as Russell Martin's tactics tonight, but I Storm Flores. Eventually, you're up the top of the hill, and heavy hangs the head that wears the crown, or in my case, is a chimney cap. And if you split it, it's if the chimney stack's mutual, something comes off it, you can't work out whose chimney's whose, so you can split it with your neighbour's insurance, even though the things come off and landed in your side of the roof, went down the slates. But I just said, no, I'll just put it on our insurance, we all get the one job. Aye, how do you folks? My name's Alec Anderson, 227 layers, and I can't remember the first line. And all I'm thinking about just now is the second episode of Knowing Me, Knowing You with Alan Partridge. I watched it at the time, no, about 30 odd years ago. And the second episode, he was at the start, he reviews the reviews, in the papers of the first episode. And he gets a great review. The first episode of Knowing Me, Knowing You, got a great review from, is it TV Quick magazine? And he talks about Philip Parsons of the Times. And the snooty papers, he calls him, Philip Parsons of the Times, who said the show was moribund. It was moribund. And he turns to the audience, is it moribund? Do you think I should? And they're like, no, Alan, it isn't. He's like, there you go. That proves you are wrong, Philip Parsons of the Times. But it's at the end, and I can't find the YouTube footage of the whole episode or whatever, but at the end he does a wheel of fire or something. It's a kind of daredevil act that he's going to get involved in, a wheel of death or something. And I remember him, because I've used it, I just use it all the time. One of the things you pick up on telly and just quote it all the time in similar situations. So he's facing the camera, he's going, yeah, Philip Parsons of the Times, get a knife and a fork and a plate and put some words in that plate and prepare to eat your words, basically. Prepare to eat your words. And I think both myself and Russell Martin are getting a plate and a knife and a fork and some words for Tuesday night for the full time in the game with Victoria Plzen at Ibrox, because one of us is going to, somebody's going to have to eat their words, I would imagine. If we get pumped and Russell Martin's for the boots, I'll be eating my words, and he's certainly hoping after the moribund performance at Motherwell. But Russell Martin is hoping that the Rangers support, or his detractors in the Rangers support, and some of his critics in the media will have to get a plate and a knife and a fork and prepare to eat. You know what I'm trying to say there. So this, I just want to talk to you mostly about the presser. Obviously, we've got it's supposed to be a European preview pod, but everybody's talking about what Russell Martin was talking about at full time at Fir Park on Saturday after that 1-8 draw with Motherwell. Terrible second half from Rangers after showing plenty of promise in the first half. Unable to see the game out, but it wasn't about the result as far as Russell Martin was concerned. So in today's press conference, he only managed to squeeze in, it's supposed to be a pre-match press conference ahead of the game, focusing on the game against Plzen. I think he was asked like one question about it right at the end, and it was just a squad update. It was an afterthought. Everybody was asking him about his comments after the game, where he was just criticising his players' complete lack of effort and saying that anybody who wasn't prepared to give their all the time was going to be out the door. And I just thought the key line was, it all comes from a place of love. I thought that was absolutely lovely. The fundamental problem on Saturday wasn't knowledge or ability, it was attitude. And that's not good. That's what he's saying. That's the one thing that we can't have. We can't have a lack of effort. There's so much tactical and technical changes that are needed to the squad, that he's bringing in all these tactical and technical changes for his blueprints. And they've only had 3 games. We've only played 3 games, and we haven't lost any of them. We haven't been beaten yet. But it will get better, but only if the players. This is the one thing we don't have almost at the time. We can't afford players not to be putting in the physical effort to applying themselves properly, because there's so much kind of muscle memory to be built up, and so much cerebral energy, I would imagine, being used. I'm going to kind of paraphrase him here a lot, but he did definitely mention the phrases learned behaviour, default. It's got to be a default that you're giving it absolutely everything. He says we've got to get better foundations of performance, and we've got to create better habits. Kind of buzzwords, buzz phrases, a bit jargonish, but very kind of, well, true. All very true, all very pertinent, and all understandable. It's not that kind of jargon which hides the real meaning. This is what we need to get. We need to get a default setting where we just are always playing to our most energetic. We're giving it absolutely everything we've got all the time on the park, so that if another team beats us, well, they beat us. And then that, I think he's basically saying that's how they can. I can take the blame. I will take the blame for the tactics. And the players could basically do themselves a favour if they put in maximum effort. Then the blame can only fall on me, or the opposition will just have been a much better team. But that wasn't the case on Saturday. He said it wasn't emotional. He wasn't angry in his response the other day, but he did say during the press conference it was emotional, but disappointed, but angry. I think he said that on Saturday. But he's definitely tried to. He's dialing it back a bit today, but also underscoring it. What he meant, explaining it. I think he did it very well. I remember Jock Wallace and John Gregg at the 1978 Scottish Cup final for us to win the treble. It's the second. I remember us losing to Celtic in the '77 Scottish Cup final, watching that live on the telly, and the following. It was the first one to been live on the telly since the '50s, and then the following. I'm just still a kid. I was like 9. They're coming up in 9 years old. The following year when we're playing Aberdeen in the Scottish Cup final to win the treble, and I'm watching Jock Wallace and John Gregg, running into each other's arms at the final whistle after we'd won it. That's great, but it was years later that John Gregg came out with the story that what had actually happened was Jock Wallace had said to them in his team talk before the game, get down that tunnel and don't fucking dare come back here without that fucking trophy, kind of thing. And John Gregg's, I was raging. I was absolutely, they've been treated so disrespectfully after having had given it to the club and all that. And it turned out that was his last game for Rangers, of course, because Jock Wallace had his own problems with the board after that and left. But to be spoken to like that by the manager, and we just won the league, we won the League Cup, we'd won the treble 2 seasons before and all that. He felt it was horrendous, and he went out there absolutely raging and did win the cup and come back with the cup for Jock Wallace. And it's almost like, I think sometimes when managers are brutal to their players or horrible to their players, they're actually taking the pressure off them. They're making it about the players just go out there worrying about the manager. They go out there worrying about that, and the opposition in front of them doesn't bother them, so to speak. They'll just do what they've got to do. Sometimes it can have a negative effect. It can make them not want to play for the manager. But I think Russell Martin is thinking this is going to go the right way, because, as he's saying, he's done it before. He did it at Southampton. Did a good start at Southampton when he was in the Championship. He took over there when they were in the Championship, but they went in a 4-game losing streak, and he bollocked them in public. And then they went 25 games unbeaten. He says, I've done it before, but I've never had to do it a second time. I think that's what he said, because like myself, he sometimes has got so much to say that it kind of comes out in a bit of a mumble, and I can't quite make out what he's saying, but I'm pretty sure he said, I've done it a few times and I've never had to do it again. When he's done it at a club, is give the players a bit of a public bollocking. It's about creating a culture. He's saying creating a culture. We want to get more leaders in. We've got leaders in the dressing room, but they could be better. They could be brought on to be better leaders. We maybe need to get a few more leaders in there. And he was asked if he thinks that can have a detrimental effect, calling the players out in public. And he said if it's a detrimental effect on anyone, then perhaps that's the kind of player who shouldn't be. I think it's something like who shouldn't be on this journey with us. But he means shouldn't be at a club like Rangers, because he says to play for this club you have to be strong and resilient. He would know. And it's absolutely true, as we can tell by the reaction at the weekend. It's horrible round about here, round about Rangers land just now. It's toxic. And I was kind of lashing out myself in my own way. I lash out at the toxicity, which means I think I'm saving myself. I'm being all precious. I just love Rangers. I can't believe you've been so nasty about them. But that's me. That's been displaced. But that's my nastiness coming out as well. We're all just upset and being a bit horrible just now. So the manager's going out there and basically telling the players what a lot of the supporters want to tell the players. But now we've had this thing, I think it went too far today. I can hear various people building it up to being, I bet he's not going to tell the right players. He's not as upset with the players that I want him to be upset with, when he hasn't mentioned any names. So I think we're getting a bit carried away with ourselves. There's something else at play here. I'm going to discuss that later in this pod. I think there is anyway. But they had a bit of a laugh with somebody who asked him the old question. They phrased it as basically, "Are you angry because you were a shite player who only got the career he did in playing football because he put in 100% effort all the time?" And he was saying, he does that thing. He's self-deprecating. He's not an egomaniac or anything like that. He's a really, really nice guy, Russell Martin, and he is really honest, and I totally believe him when he says it all comes from a place of love. And he said he needed to learn as he became a coach, he needed to learn that not every player was the same as him. Some of them had a lot of talent, and sometimes you have to be nice to them, probably, is what he's meaning. Some players need cajoled, and they're not able to give 100% effort all the time. And he said he would take on a few players who were, so much. He would love to have players that are super talented to the point where they don't have to give him 100% effort to perform at the levels he requires. But yeah, he was saying basically, he's had to fight for everything he gets in football because he wasn't a very good player. We saw that when he came to Rangers, even though that was a bad point in his career, and it was a bad point in Rangers history as well. Somebody said, "Have you gone too early with that?" And this was a good bit as well in the press conference. They said, "Don't watch that. Watch this." Is what they usually say. "Oh, don't watch this. Watch that. Go and watch the press conference. Go and watch. It's like 14, 15 minutes long. If you haven't seen it already, and I don't know why. If you're enough of a really intense Rangers supporter to be on this podcast watching my part, I think the first thing you'll have seen, you probably get it piped straight into your eyeballs anytime the Rangers official YouTube page posts a video, but get on there and watch it. This is the heavy fat bore sound, but get on, watch that. Watch the Rangers official YouTube page, today's pre-match presser. It's really, really good. I think it's really telling, and it's really important in the career of Russell Martin as Rangers head coach. But somebody said, have you gone early? You've gone a bit early with it, which is a question. It's something I'm going to talk about as well. This is the thing. He's put some pressure on himself. I think he wants that pressure, but have you gone too early with it? And he's like, gone early with what? Gone early with what? Gone too early with what? And the guys, the journalist, I don't know who it was, but he's saying it in terms of being so honest with the players. Basically, have you bollocked them too publicly too early? Because it's usually seen as a last resort, a method of last resort when you actually take it, the players, they throw them under a bus, is how we usually put it. The manager's throwing the players under a bus, gutting them out in public, calling them out. It's usually seen as a kind of act of desperation for a manager, but he's done it really early. And he says, no, you can't be honest when it suits you. It's no honesty, obviously. So you've got to be honest all the time. And he said that's it. He's not here to be political or to play any games. He's just going to be honest all the time, and I loved it. I really loved it. He said it's not a contrived thing. It's about making sure that his post-match reaction on Saturday, not a contrived thing. It's about making sure we understand as a club, players, staff, and supporters, what is acceptable and what's going to help us win. And the stuff that hurt us on Saturday is the stuff that shouldn't be hurting us. And this is this whole point of, if it's his tactics, fair enough. If we don't have the players aren't technically talented enough, that's fine. There's nothing you can do about that. But if it's a lack of effort, you should never be slipping up in a football match because of a lack of effort. And he's definitely putting it on the previous regimes. He's definitely putting it on past managers. And he's I think that's why he's went so early. I think he's needed to do it. He's been planning to do it, and he just needed the excuse of one, properly bad result. He said it was the performance, not the result. If we'd won the game, if we'd lost the game, it would still have been the same reaction because of the performance. But we had pretty poor performances against Panathinaikos as well in some respects, and he didn't go apeshit in them because it was a material gain. We're getting through a really important European round. So it was something else, and he's brought it to a head really early. It's either going to be a success, he's going to get the reaction from the players, or it'll be Russell Martin that's out the door sooner rather than later. So it's pretty much balls out. A lighter note: Oliver Antman has arrived, the Finnish international. He scored 7 goals in 22 internationals. A goal every 3 games at international level. That's pretty impressive. He's arrived from Go Ahead Eagles of Deventer in the Eredivisie. I've seen the picture. There's a 6-minute interview with him. I haven't seen it, I have to admit, so maybe he says something really revealing on that. I haven't had a chance to watch that yet. And also, by the time you see this, we'll know whether or not he's got in the European squad. I think it was 10 p.m. Monday night. It was the cut-off for getting new players into the European squad for this round of Europe, but I think they're trying to get him straight in there. Well, the manager confirmed they were trying to get him straight in there. I'm assuming Mikey Moore's going to get put in there as well, the young boy who arrived on loan from Tottenham at the weekend. But it's running about £2.5-3 million, I think, for Oliver Antman. I think it's £3 million. Is it £3 million? Aye. Was it £2.5 million? It's €3 million. It's a bit of money anyway for the fella. He's right-sided. He can play on the right-hand side. I think he's one of these guys, another fellow who can play all across the front, maybe play on the left-hand side as well. And we do know that this head coach of ours likes to kind of go against the grain when it comes to what foot the players favour, but he did well last season in the Eredivisie, his only season with Go Ahead Eagles of Deventer, and he scored his first goal for them against Groningen, who he was on loan at from Nordsjælland, the Danish club where we got Diamande, Mohamed Bobo Diamande. We got him from Nordsjælland as well, and they loaned him to I don't know. I need to double check this. I don't know if he was on Groningen up until the end of the season. Then he joined Go Ahead Eagles the following season, because Go Ahead Eagles last season won the Dutch Cup for the first time in their history. They won the league a few times back. They're kind of a Dutch Union St Gilloise, except I don't think they've not got the money now, the backing that USG have got. But their glory days were, back kind of the black and white days. But I think they won the league like 3 or 4 times, like the 20s and 30s. Go Ahead Eagles, but they'd never won the Dutch Cup, and they won it last season on penalties in the final. And that put them straight into the Europa League group stages, which means if we go out in this round against Plzen, or the playoff round of the Champions League, we drop straight into the Europa League group stages, then his first goal for Rangers could be against Go Ahead Eagles, after his first goal for Go Ahead Eagles being against hopefully his previous club. So I don't know if that's some sort of record. If it maybe, I need to score against us for somebody else. Somebody's probably done that before. Their debut for 2 successive clubs, they scored the first goal for those 2 clubs against the previous. I don't know. Anyway. And it would also mean that he wouldn't score his first goal for the club until September, of course, late September, and that won't be good enough in these days where Rangers Twitter is continuing to separate the kind of boastful certainty of beauty celebrations, the pride and joy at the fact we were taken over by an American consortium, from the fact that it's that American consortium who employed the people who then employed Russell Martin as manager, and will have done the due diligence. So I don't know. No Czech side has ever reached a European final. Slovakian, yes, Slovan Bratislava in the '69 Cup Winners' Cup. They beat Dunfermline in the semi-final. But it's the thing. I do that thing the same as other guys my age. I balk every time I hear somebody saying, for example, Mikey Moore is the youngest Tottenham player, the youngest guy to play for the Tottenham first team in the Premier League era. And it's like, well, that's 1992. Same as the European Cup became the Champions League 92-93, and the Premier League down south, it used to be the old First Division, 92-93. It's like football started in 1992. You hear guys my age saying that all the time, but it must be kind of the opposite for Czechoslovakia, because the Velvet Divorce, as they call it, the Czechia split from Slovakia, I think it was about 91, 92. So that's when the Czech League and the Slovakian League came out of the old Czechoslovakian League. So that's quite interesting. They became smaller, whereas everything else was kind of deregulated in the Champions League, and the English top flight became bigger. Not in terms of teams, but just in terms what the Champions League certainly did, but in terms of coverage and money and all that. But it became a bit smaller than the Czech. So they go the other way. I find that quite interesting. Nobody else does. But we played Inter Bratislava in the '60s in Europe. I think we beat them, and I think that's the only Slovakian club I've ever played. So it's been, even though Dukla Prague were a part of Czechoslovakia when we played them in the early '80s, that was it, and they gubbed us in European Cup Winners' Cup. But it's kind of more recent years we've got a bit of a history going on with Czech clubs. It's all been Czech clubs. So no Czech clubs have reached a European final. I mention that because, as I've mentioned a few times in this podcast, 106 clubs have reached the final of a European competition: Cup Winners' Cup, UEFA Cup, Fairs Cup, Europa League, whatever you want to call them, European Cup, Champions League, and Conference League. The proper European club finals. 106 different clubs so far have reached the final of one of those, and I try to see them all. And I want to see them all at Ibrox, basically playing against us being one of them. So I ruined my holiday to go and see Club Brugge, just in a friendly, because I'd never seen them before. They'd played a few European finals in the '70s, a couple of European finals in the '70s, and that was me. I was finally getting to see Club Brugge at Ibrox. I wasn't at the game, the Scott Nisbet game back in the day, which I explained at great length why. But the next round of this Champions League, the playoff round, was pre-drawn earlier today, Monday, and we will get Bruges or Salzburg. Red Bull Salzburg in the next round. Red Bull Salzburg, it's kind of Wimbledon, MK Dons scenario, and they're the MK Dons of the situation in Salzburg, where they took Austria Salzburg, who as Casino Austria Salzburg reached the 1994 UEFA Cup final and lost it to Inter. So it would be brilliant if I could get to see them if we get through this round. It'd be brilliant just to beat somebody and get through into the playoff round of the Champions League. No harm in it anyway. We're guaranteed Europa League football. What the hell? So it'd be lovely because I saw Athletic Club for the first time ever. In the last European game of last season at Ibrox, and then I would get me a hit. I've seen Bruges in a friendly, and then I get a hit in the Champions League. It's like 3 different competitions, or a friendly and 2 different competitions. It'd be and that would take me to number 80. That'd be the 80th of those 106 teams I've ever seen. So that's quite a significant number. 79. Bruges was 79. To see them again would be kind of annoying, but to see Salzburg, Red Bull Salzburg would be great because they would do. I would then have to go over to Salzburg, and I've been in Salzburg. I've been at a day trip from Munich to Salzburg, but I'd have to go over and see one of the Phoenix clubs that was created to kind of take on the passion of not all the Austria Salzburg fans are in love with Red Bull Salzburg, but that would be the hit anyway. That would be number 80. That would take me towards the end point. The 106 clubs will be getting closer. It's kind of the opposite of when you charge a tenner instead of £9.99. It makes a big difference. But yeah, that's the interesting thing for me. So no Czech clubs ever reached a European final. But we had played Dukla Prague in 82. 81, 82, we won the Scottish Cup by beating Dundee United in the final after a replay 4-1. John Gregg, the manager, and he was the manager in our last ever Cup Winners' Cup match, having been the captain when we won the Cup Winners' Cup. Dukla Prague beat us 3-0 in Prague, and then we beat them 2-1 at Ibrox. I think Jim Bett scored one of the goals, but I don't know for sure because I wasn't there. And I'd been at my first Rangers game in 77, and we played in the Cup Winners' Cup the following season, and then the next time we played in the Cup Winners' Cup was 82. So that 81, 82, we only played Dukla Prague, and they put us out. And that was it. That was the last time we played in the Cup Winners' Cup, and so I never got to see Rangers playing in the one European trophy. The only Cup Winners' Cup match I ever went to was the final Cup Winners' Cup match, the final, when Lazio beat Real Mallorca at Villa Park. And then I wasn't there the first time we played Sparta Prague in the Champions League kind of playoff round to get into so it wasn't. It was the European Cup, the last ever kind of official European Cup, but they were trialling the group stage format for the following season's official Champions League starting. I mean, we were in that, made that okay, but the season before in the European Cup, we didn't get into the new group stage because we lost, infamously Stuart McCall 2 goals and then Andy Gorman at chucking one over the line, I think in extra time. I wasn't at that one, but I then saw Sparta Prague in the Letna in a Czech League game against Sigma Olomouc. I think that'd be about 2005 or something. Went over to Prague. That's nothing to do with Rangers. Although it is because the main stand, I'd never seen the Letna. I'd always see the opposite stand, but the stand the cameras were in had a little kind of crisscross lattice work, like a kind of homage to the Archibald Leach style. It was quite nice, quite a surprise as well. But then we got Sparta Prague another couple of times in Europe very recently. In the Europa League, Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's first game in charge of us, we had to win by 2-0 to get through to the knockout rounds of the Europa League, and we did. Alfredo Morelos at the 4. It was a great night, and we end up getting to the final. And then a couple of seasons later, we get them again in the Europa League group stage, and I think it was Philippe Clement's first European game in charge was the away game, wasn't it, in the Letna, and it was a really, really well organised 0-0 where the players worked really hard. And it was 2-1, I think, at Ibrox. That was intense as well. I think we went 2-0 up. They pulled one back. That was a really intense night as well. Really good stuff. But everything to do with Czech teams, I'm afraid, certainly Prague teams, has been soiled by what happened with Slavia Prague in between times. In between our first clash with Sparta in the 90s and then the 2 times we got Sparta again because we'd won the league. We'd actually won the league on the Sunday with Celtic dropping points at Tannadice in 2020-2021, our 55 season, and then the following midweek, the Thursday, we go to Prague. We draw 1 each at Eden with Slavia Prague, who is a really interesting kind of Metropa Cup, historic sides, kind of coffee shop football. They got the big red star on. There's just really interesting stuff, and I was really gutted that I wasn't going to get to the game at Ibrox. And then we beat them. They beat us fair and square. I think footballing wise, they were a well organised, quite a savvy team, Slavia Prague, but they were a bunch of racist bastards, and their treatment of Glenn Kamara was horrific. We'd lost the game, we'd lost the tie, but then they gave just absolutely unbelievable. And what was even more unbelievable was when we went back to Sparta Prague the following season, and I think it was because of racism, it was because of COVID. They've certainly had other racist incidents in the big Prague grounds. They went to the grounds of the big Prague clubs, which aren't actually that big in terms of grounds. It's ice hockey. I think is probably the main sport in the Czech Republic. The Czech national team do very well. They got to the final, Euro '96. I was at that game. Patrick Berger scoring for them at Wembley. The Czechoslovakia side that won Euro '76 on penalties with the Panenka from Panenka. They were, I think, the majority of that team were Slovakians. But anyway, they can't do it. They can't get to European club finals. It's not as big, but they're always a decent level. But we went back there to the Letna, back to Prague, and there was 10,000 kids in the stadium with supervisors because of some sort of ban was in place, some sort of arrangement had been come to, and the children were booing Glenn Kamara every time he touched the ball, even though it was Sparta fans and it had been Slavia that had it. It was just horrific, out and out racism, absolutely horrific, really, really depressing. So that kind of taints the Prague, the Czech experience, having been to Bohemka, the Dimple. I've actually got a framed photograph of it's just right behind me, but I've got it on the floor now of a ground that I was in love with. I was really fascinated with to get there. I saw Dundee United playing there in the European Cup. I think it was the Uefa Cup in the 80s on Sports Scene. This really kind of grainy, tiny wee ground, grainy footage almost in Prague, the fascinating city of Prague. And I eventually get to go there on that visit I made when I went to watch Sparta. I think they're one of the, I think they're the only major. No, I've never seen Dukla either, but we've played them because I think that's the only one we haven't played. Bohemians. But once all this stuff happened with Glenn Kamara, it really spoiled the whole Czech thing. So I'm hoping it's not the same. But Victoria Zizkov in Europe as well. I think it was the UEFA Cup under Alec McLeish. I was in New York. First time in New York, amazing, sensational, and a lot of it got spoiled by the fact that I switched on the telly to see that Rangers had lost 2-0 to Victoria Zizkov, another Prague side, in the first leg. And at Ibrox, I think we were winning 3-1. I was back for that game, back up the back of the Govan. And I think we were winning 3-1 in extra time, so we needed one more goal. At this point, we'd never recovered the 2-goal first leg deficit, and of course, Stefan Klos come up from the back for the injury time in extra time for the corner, and he got his head on it, and it was going down to, I thought it was going to go in the bottom corner, but it went past the post. He didn't quite get his Jimmy Glass moment, and Victoria Zizkov put us out. So we got a mixed record against Czech clubs, and Victoria Plzen, not from Prague, didn't do anything in the 21st century except qualify for Europe, in the 20th century except qualify for Europe once. And I think that was as runners-up in the old Czechoslovakian Cup. And in the Cup Runners' Cup in 71-72, they got Bayern Munich in the first round. They were put out easily by Bayern Munich, the great Bayern side who basically would win that the following year's Euros, the following seasons, the following summer's Euros. And then the World Cup, with a few Borussia Mönchengladbach players chucked in. The following season's World Cup, the 74 World Cup, a great side. Gerd Müller, Franz Beckenbauer, Sepp Maier, Jörg Schwarzenbeck, Uli Hoeneß, Buller, Franz Buller. I don't know why I'm talking about that, because we got them in the semi-final. We got Bayern in the semi-final of that same tournament, and that's, of course, we beat them. Probably our greatest ever performance was beating Bayern in the semi-final of that very same Cup Winners' Cup tournament, and we went on to win it, the only time we have won a European trophy. So there's a tortured kind of link there to something positive with Victoria Plzen, who were sponsored by Skoda, and we're up to our knees in Bohemian beer, because I was last week years old, as they say. I was today years old almost. It was last week. I was reading about Victoria Plzen, and I was just like, Urquell. The Pilsner, Urquell Pilsner is, maybe it's a backer of the club. It seems to feature in a lot of other stuff. It's Pilsner was invented in Plzen. And if only there'd been some sort of clue, if only some sort of hint you could have worked out, why is it called Pilsner? And why was it invented in Plzen? I don't know where it gets the name. That's really embarrassing for somebody. It's like the way I love Rangers, but I don't know anything about them. Just don't understand Rangers at all. But I just love them, and I consume lots of it. It's the same when it comes to the beer. I love it. I love Pilsner. I love drinking it, but I don't know anything about it. So that was quite a revelation. I was sponsored by Skoda. They were called Skoda Pilsen, I think, for about 20 years. But they didn't do anything until 2010-11 when they won the Czech League, won any top flight for the first time in their history, and they won it 6 times total. They're probably the biggest club outside Prague in the Czech League, most successful club, and they're regulars. They've played in the Champions League, Conference League, and Europa League group stages. They're regulars in the last 16 of the Europa League in particular. They're as we know, and I mentioned this before, they were in the Champions League group stages the same season as our last appearance there, 2022-23, when we were accused of having the worst record ever in one edition of the four team Champions League group stage. I've always liked to argue that you can definitely argue that, and one of the reasons we can argue it is because Victoria Pilsen conceded more goals than us that season. In their group stage, they also won 0 points. They were in a group with Barcelona, Bayern, and Inter. We were in a group with Liverpool, Ajax, and Napoli. But if they scored a few more goals, and I think they scored about 5 goals while losing about 26 goals or something, but they beat us in goal difference by 1. So I've always since then I've been a bit resentful of Victoria Pilsen, but it's nice for me if I can't see a new European finalist, a former European finalist club to get off my list. It's nice to see a new club, because we would have been playing Servette otherwise if they hadn't beaten Servette in the last rounds. Where we were drawing with Panathinaikos in Athens. Epic performance in the heat. They were going a goal down early doors, a cracking goal it was too, to Servette in Geneva, having lost at home to Servette the previous week in the first legs. They were 2-0 down on aggregate, and they went for it, and they beat them 3-1 eventually. A couple of sendings off in the game, one for each team. So somebody suspended for this game. I haven't looked into it, sorry. Somebody suspended for the trip to Ibrox. Rob was telling me in Jersnet last night that they've got a star midfielder who's off to Lyon apparently, so that's good for us. They've got Mates Vidra. That's the only guy I know. He scored in Geneva last week. One of the 3 goals. The last one came from a penalty near the end. So they've got the big dangly things. They don't lie down to anybody, and they don't balk under pressure, which is why our manager wants our players to be, our head coaches wanting our players to always be putting the effort in, because you're going to come up against teams like this. But Mates Vidra, who's in kind of retirement age now, but played for a whole lot of Championship clubs in England, Burnley, Reading, Derby, I think West Brom, and he had a couple of quick spells, and scored a few goals, maybe like 2 or 3 goals in the Premier League, but generally played in the Championship. So he's of a level. He's a guy we should watch out for. And Pilsen, they beat Hearts last week in the Europa League playoff round, put Hearts into Conference League. So they know what it's like to come to Scotland, and they finished the best ever run. The only time they get past the last 16, but they get to the last 16 a lot in their short European history of various tournaments, usually the Europa League, but they got to the Conference League quarter-finals season before last against Fiorentina. They went out to Fiorentina, and last season they went out of the Europa League at the last 16 stage to Lazio, and I don't think it was any disgrace, Lazio having finished top of the group, the 36-team group that was topped by Lazio. So they're good. They know what they're doing as a club, and this particular team, Victoria Pilsen, are a good, solid European side, and this will be difficult, lemon difficult, and it's all about the manager. I think in real kind of Ange Postecoglou style, when Ange had lost his first game in charge of Celtic, and then lost his first Old Firm game as well at Ibrox, he was really under pressure, but he wasn't, because Russell Martin has drawn his first league game in charge of Rangers, and is getting less back up from us than Ange Postecoglou got from the Celtic fans. There's going to have to be huge changes to that starting 11. Does there? What would be the point of giving the players a total bollocking in public then, if to just drop them and not give them a chance to? It's surely better to give them a wee chance to prove themselves, prove they can react to the bollocking. If you think Rangers were horrendous on Saturday, well, so did the manager or the head coach, and he told them, and does via as many public kind of platforms as possible. And I actually hope to hell that it's part of a plan, which he probably, as I said on Jersnet, ran past Kevin Thelwell and Patrick Stewart when he was being interviewed, or after for the job, or after he was interviewed, after he was accepted for the job, and he watched the tapes of our games from last season. These guys do their due diligence, Thelwell, Stewart, as do Marath and Kavanagh, like billionaires, I think. So the San Francisco 49ers are, I think, the 6th richest sports franchise on the planet. They do not employ duds. They not. Marath built them a new stadium. He was put in charge of that. these guys don't make mistakes. They can't they can't afford to. They're winners basically, and I think they know what they're doing. We were told their appointments could be underwhelming. That's certainly the case with Russell Martin. I found it underwhelming, but I think I feel as if a few Rangers fans are too almost invested in him being in him failing. But that's always the same, isn't it? It's always the same. People go hard with their opinions. I do the same. But if you haven't again already, I'd recommend watching the Goal Hanger Productions, Gary Lineker, The Rest is Football, Gary Lineker podcast, the Rest is Football podcast, Gary Lineker interviewing Russell Martin just in between being sacked by Southampton and taking on the Rangers job. It's really interesting and it's a fantastic insight into his methodology and his influences. As I was saying in the podcast on Saturday night, that my post-match reaction, I think his influences tactically are Roberto Martinez through the person of Leon Britton, the Scouse Swansea midfielder that we'd enjoy playing against, and then suddenly couldn't play against him because couldn't find him anywhere on the park because of the influence of Roberto Martinez when he became Swansea manager. So I think that's what got him interested in the, for want of a better phrase, tiki-taka, that kind of progressive, expansive football, whatever you want to might call it. But I think his influence, he mentions that his chief influence, his biggest influence in terms of management is Paul Lambert. We might not like hearing that from a biased point of view. But in Paul Lambert's his managerial career, the way it went, eventually you might use that as evidence to say why Russell Martin is going to become a bad manager. But he said that Paul Lambert took him from Wycombe Wanderers. He had him as his captain at Wycombe Wanderers, and then he took him from there to Norwich when Lambert became Norwich City manager. And he said he was so aggressive. He said Lambert was really aggressive, really getting in about the players all the time and getting his face. And he would make a point of going first. If he was gutting the players out at half time in the dressing room for a poor first half, the first person he would go for, he said, was Russell Martin, because he knew Russell Martin could take it. You have to watch this podcast just to find out about Russell Martin's life, his early life. We all know about it. And we've all had hard lives. We've had various things going on with us. But, my name's Alec Anderson, and I'm going to have to change my birth certificate if this doesn't work out for Russell Martin, because I was boasting about the fact that I was born in the same maternity ward, the same maternity hospital as Russell Martin's dad, from what I found out in that. His dad was born in Ayrshire. So it'd be Irvine, it would be, but and I thought I was going to change it because Nicola Sturgeon, I'm no fan of the SNP. So Nicola Sturgeon, I think she's for Buttery Hill, so she'd been probably born in the same maternity ward as myself. Anyway, it's going to most folk might change their name by deed poll. I'm going to have to change the place I was born. If this doesn't work, I'll just make it Kenya, something like that. But you find it. He's had a hard life, Russell Martin. His dad did jail time and what have you. So Paul Lambert knew that Russell Martin could take it. If he does that thing where he guts out the captain, who is a legend as a player, with his teammates, and also at Norwich, he was a legend with his support. He was known unbelievably, coincidentally, and symbolically as the Cafu of Norfolk. And it's now the blue Cafu that he's got as his captain at Rangers. So I'm wondering if it's been the Paul Lambert thing. He said he would go in there and Lambert would come in and he would gut out if it was a question of the players' efforts or whatever. He was questioning their efforts in the first half. It would be Russell Martin that he went for first, because obviously the players, any kind of new players that thought if he's gone for the captain, then nobody's safe. Just put the fear of God through all of them. It's obviously something he thinks is it's a psychological tactic, if you like, that Russell Martin's playing career was based on. So he's maybe just trying the same with his own players. I think that can maybe explain things. I would like to know if he's done the same with Tav, because he's talking today in that presser saying that we do have leaders, but they maybe need a bit more coaching. So Jack Butland, Raskin had the armband last season, and you've got Tav as well, who people always question, or doubters always question. So he's certainly using aggression in the same way, I think, as Paul Lambert maybe explains the lambasting, publicly thing in Saturday. But is it to re-spark the starting 11 on Saturday? This is all based on trying to work out what the team lineup's going to be tomorrow night against Plzen, or tonight against Victoria Plzen. Because wildly, what's happened is we now have the support ready to go crazy, whipping themselves into a kind of social media frenzy. Not only if he doesn't make massive changes in the very next game, this game against Plzen, because we've decided that's what his post-match comments at Fir Park meant, that he was going to make massive, he was going to rip that team to pieces, that starting lineup to pieces. But also, if he doesn't drop the players that we want him to drop, and make no mistake, that's what's been talked up, because there's some fans are so sure Martin loves Tav when they hate Tav, and he hates Diamandi and Raskin when who they claim is now ruining their. And I wonder what he's doing with Diamandi and Raskin as well. But Diamandi and Raskin were never bang on, not certain to be performance. They'd fluctuate in form the whole time. They've been at Rangers so far before Russell Martin come along. So all in all, it's going to be a lovely atmosphere tomorrow night or tonight. It's a total slavering hate fest for Rangers from the Rangers support in Europe. But why didn't he do anything about it? Why didn't he do anything about the performance on Saturday? Is one of the criticisms being thrown out there. Well, he did. You know, they did well in the first half. So he couldn't really bollock them at half time at Fir Park. And when it clearly wasn't working in the second half, he made a whole lot of substitutions, like every kind of 10 minutes, which people still aren't happy about, because it wasn't, as far as some folk were concerned, the right substitutions. But it's inarguably proactive. You know, as soon as he sees things are going wrong, it's like, you're not putting enough effort, you're coming off. Danilo comes off. I mean, Rothwell come off, I'm sure. I feel as if he was maybe putting in the right effort. I don't know. Maybe just generally knackered. Raskin comes off. Diamandi, Danilo. It was criticisms of all of them, I think. But yeah, people are saying, yeah, but we were also poor in both games against Panathinaikos. He didn't bollock them then, but he did say after both these games, we've still got a long way to go. These weren't perfect performances, and we didn't lose either of those games. We won one of them, in fact. And it was a mega result in Athens last week. So he kind of used that as an excuse to bollock them. The very first games, 2 games in the season. This is only the third game in, and he's imposing a new playing style on them, so that it's going to be rusty. In fact, we recorded a tremendous victory in the tie against Panathinaikos, so he can't go for them then. He's been waiting, I think, for a loss, and that's probably why he prefaced his Sky post-match interview with Luke Shanley on Saturday with, we deserved to lose the game. So he's recharacterising, he's reframing a poor result as the worst result, so he could then go in both studs up, as I called it. And I know I go back and sometimes I'll break up the pods into more manageable chunks, because I can't help, as I'm doing now, going on too long. So that means I'm listening to myself again sometimes, and I realised that I'd said something going in both studs up. It's either you get in studs up or get in with both feet. But I'd managed to make it. I think I spent too much time talking about Freddie Mercury and leather bars in the podcast the other day. But my team for Plzen this Tuesday night is the same. Just the same, just for a laugh. Just put out the same starting 11, just for a laugh. The first poor Tav pass, or the kind of lack of a tracking back by Kieran Dow, and it's going to be Sam Lammers staying on the park while Todd Cantwell gets subbed off after 30 odd minutes against Aris Limassol all over again. I mean, Ross McCausland scored the actual goal. Ross McCausland took him over. Cantwell scored the only goal of that game afterwards. But yeah, it's Tav scored 131 goals, and no one of them is counted. Not one of them is counted in his defence. People just dismiss this. I mean, he scores goals and that, but you know, it doesn't. I mean, obviously, it doesn't matter. It's not good enough if he's then, you know, conceding goals, and he was clearly at fault for Motherwell's goal. A raft of people were at fault, and I think a whole raft of people not doing their jobs in front of Tav is what leads to us conceding that goal. I don't think we're going to have the same team, the same starting 11 on the park against Plzen. We definitely want to get the Ant-Man in there, which means poor old Kieran Dow can get a wee break before somebody gets on the park and stabs him or something like that. That's quite unbelievable. The friend people actually kind of say, I don't know what's going to happen next. The supporters are ready to rock and all that. That's getting too much. You know what I mean? For me anyway. I know we're paying money and I know we've invested stuff, but I think I'm going to come on to that. I think I know why we're feeling like this, but there's I would get the Ant-Man or Mikey Moore, the new boy from Tottenham, if he's in the European squad as well, if he gets in there. Maybe if the two of them are in, I think Mikey Moore also comes on the right-hand side, so he can come on as a sub for Ant-Man, who's just arrived, or vice versa, give Kieran Dow a break. But Kieran Dow, who was always injured or He scored a belter versus Livingston, and he scored against Motherwell at Fir Park as well. It's a bit of deflection and all that. And he's been at Birmingham with Tom Brady for the last 6 months, but he's getting in the neck from everybody because he's not doing enough tracking back. So I think maybe you get a chance if he's going to go. If we think the manager isn't liking Diamandi and Raskin, whether it's him ruining them or not with the way he's deploying them these days, then maybe Connor Barron and Lyle Cameron are going to come in for Diamandi and Raskin in this game. I don't expect a lot of changes because he's already, as I was predicting in Jersnet last night, he's come out today and said they were absolute beasts in training when he got them in for a punishment session on Sunday, and that's the old tactic. All managers and head coaches do that kind of thing. No, they responded really well in training, so that's it. You can just put out the same team. You can field the same team, but I think you should field the same team anyway. Because if you're gutting them out, well, give them a chance to respond. The problem, of course, is James Tavernier being at right back and us having a right back that's supposed to be superseding him. Max Aarons playing at left back, and he's clearly uncomfortable there in the second half. He ruined an attack by putting the ball straight out because he's hitting it with his wrong foot at the start of that half, and then towards the end of the half, he's hooking clearances infield. So I think it was Slater. He was able to get a shot away from the edge of our box, which he should have done better with the Motherwell player. But yeah, it is getting it's bad playing Aarons there, but it's going to be really interesting. I'm not going to name the team. I have no idea how Russell Martin is going to react. I don't really believe in that kind of stuff. Like just guessing at stuff when I don't have any idea, because it's been such a pivotal few days. But Kieran Dell, he's becoming like more of a scapegoat than an asylum seeker in a town centre hotel, to the point where like somebody who has done something wrong but really is getting more blame than the people. People to be blamed everywhere. I expect the police vans to be kicked by those of us who can't get on the pitch to actually have a go at him. Kieran Dell tomorrow night. 3 games. We're only 3 games into Russell Martin's reign. This is why the gloating about the US takeover really pissed me off, because it was always going to turn to this. The instant a total overhaul meant a less than perfect start to Martin's tenure. By default, it means there's going to be a less than perfect start to the new manager's reign when you've changed the ownership and the whole board and the whole coaching staff, and even getting in new players as well. This is why we wanted a caretaker after Clermont was canned, so we could at least start with a clean. We couldn't start with a new manager. We couldn't start with the same manager that we had the previous summer. So the next best thing is just start with a clean slate, just a caretaker, so the guy can come. But how can you moan and wail to the point of distraction about the lack of trebles and league titles that we're winning recently, and then think it's going to be solved in the space of 3 games? I don't get how you're ready for the hit. I mean, I hear people saying, it's been said a few times, obviously you hear all sorts of nonsense all over social media. There's people saying, that's it, he's done, but the league's done. We've dropped 2 points. It's only 1 game. We're not going to drop 2 points a game. You don't know that, Alec. But this is the worst Rangers team I've ever seen. That's something I hear all the time. This is the worst Rangers team I've ever seen. It was said last season when we got to a European quarter-final. Worst ever result in the Scottish Cup, arguably, but we got to a European quarter-final and that League Cup final, which we only lost on penalties after a really dodgy decision. It beat Celtic home and away. It wasn't our worst season at all last season. The worst season I would think would be, we're in the 4th tier of Scottish football, maybe even their first season of the Championship. It was absolutely brutal. This isn't the worst Rangers team I've ever seen, certainly. When you're beating Fenerbahce away and taking Manchester United into injury time and blah, blah, blah. But if you think this is the worst Rangers team of all time last season, why would you think it can be solved in the space of 1 quick summer turnaround? I'm constantly getting this kind of, anytime I try to be positive or contextual, even offering context about Russell Martin, and you'll find this yourself, most of the folk watching this pod are the same. You just kind of, these things happen, it's going to take time, but you get fucking real, get real, come on, wake up. Why don't you apply that same rubric, that same mindset, the get real, to the idea that we're going to be able to turn everything round and there's not going to be any kind of setbacks. The players aren't going to start slowly, despite the fact the players are new, the system is new, the head coach is new, the directors are new, the owners are new. Why do you think they're going to produce perfection? We don't want perfection. We just think, okay, we'll get into the system. I think we're very good. I think crying out for the abstract. We understand the abstract, the concept. It's going to take time. As long as I can see, signs of what he's doing, it'll be fine. Don't mind setbacks. As long as we can see signs of what he's doing, it'll be fine. Well, we did. We saw the whole first half, arguably. That 10-minute period where we had 87% possession. The first 15 minutes we were rattling the ball up front and we had a couple of smashing moves at kind of breathtaking speed. Never came to anything. We only got the one goal out of it, and of course it fell away terribly. But that's it. That's literally seeing signs that we don't mind setbacks as long as we can see what signs of what he's trying to do. That was all there on Saturday, and we've went absolutely apeshit. We've went absolutely nuts at it in general. And the manager himself's gone nuts, but we still don't want him to go nuts because he's not going to go nuts in the right way. Sorry, I know I'm going to end up saying something really silly, but this plan is definitely going to take a while to kick in. When I met my friend, I remember Robert coming up to me in the main stand after we'd beaten Hollander, scored the only goal of the game, and we'd beaten Celtic 1-0. Ange Postecoglou's first Old Firm game, he played a few players out of position, and that's the same stuff that the manager's doing just now. It's Furuhashi, actually. I think he played him in the wing or something like that, and Leon Balogun owned him. We had a few players missing that game as well. And there was big tactical decisions that Ange Postecoglou had got wrong, and that was him. He'd lost a couple of games in charge of Celtic, and I don't think he was hunted by the Celtic support. There would be big doubts, but we thought it was going to be a piece of cake. But the thing, other than the comparison there with what's happening with Russell Martin at our place, the thing I remember is just, it's always great when you beat Celtic, but it felt like a continuation of something at the same time as being something I hadn't experienced for so long. Obviously, in the front of your brain, it's like, well, we just won the first Old Firm game. That doesn't prove too much, but it's good to keep them in their place after what we did to them last season. And then Robert, he stays in a different. He sits in a different bit of the main stand. He kind of come over at the end. I wasn't expecting. I'd brought the car like an idiot, but I went to the pub. I didn't have any. I didn't drink. But I just wanted to go along to the booze. Just went to the Loudon and all that, just to take in the atmosphere. And it was the atmosphere where I sit in the main stand, the Copeland, and you've got the Govan opposite up that corner. That's where the goals scored. It's all the Rangers support all in together. It was magical. And I've been to plenty of Old Firm games at Ibrox, but we've won them more handsomely than that. But I suddenly realised that it was because COVID, the previous season, obviously, we'd won the league, but there was nobody there. Fans gathered outside for the day against St Mirren and other stuff, went to celebrate breaking lockdown rules and what have you, and it was beautiful stuff. It was quite emotional to watch it. I didn't do that, but I'm glad other fans did. But I think that's maybe what it is. We've won the league, 4 years ago. I mean, it'll be 5 years ago, whatever happens at the end of this season. But we haven't had a chance to celebrate together communally. We really haven't been there enjoying week in, week out a Rangers team coming out and just playing the way they did during 55 season. And I do still wonder, some of the games we played in 55 were some magical performances, totally dominant. And we won the league so comfortably that we probably would have won the league with crowds there as well. But a few of the games were so tense. Just watching them on Rangers TV with nobody in the stadium, you wonder how the fans would have reacted to them. But I think there's that scar tissue there from various managers, like 4 managers in the trot now that have all failed, but are left. There's scar tissue from that. There's also, that's a third successive league day opener where you feel like your hopes are instantly crushed because we don't go off to a winning start. But I think it's also just that desperation. That's why it's so kind of almost toxic just now. It's like joy denied constantly soon kind of inverts on itself and becomes this really black, horrible thing. Because we've not had that outpouring of just telling Rangers that we love them. And we're justified in telling them that we love them because they're doing something. They're being so lovable by winning and bringing us the league title. We've not been in the ground since 2011 when they've been doing that. And that's a long time, and I think we need it in our system. It's maybe making the reaction to this about OTT, or the manager, Russell Martin, just doesn't know what he's doing. And I'm not really in a position to tell you if he does or he doesn't, because I saw a film, The Sentinel. It's an old film. It was 90s, I think, maybe not 2000s. It's Michael Douglas playing an aging And he really was a bodyguard, presidential bodyguard, and Kim Basinger's the first lady, and they're having an affair. You know, but it's all kind of security top guy, and they're dotting about doing their, the shades on, and they're guarding the president, and there's somebody out to get him and that kind of thing, and they're doing that thing where he's on your six, he's on your six, when they're speaking out their little handsets and that to each other with the earphones on. He's on your nine, he's on your nine, on your three, he's making it. And I was sitting watching this when I was in Berlin on holiday. It was the only thing in English on the television. There was just one night we were back in the hotel, just having a few drinks in the hotel room. Just like, let's just watch something to telly. We'll watch any old crap. And so the next day we were walking about Berlin, and you're doing that thing. You see that guy with the lederhosen that's trying? He's actually wearing lederhosen in Berlin. It's kind of and he's got white dreads as well. White man's dreads and lederhosen. Where he's on your 4:45. There's no a minute hand involvement, and I'm saying, how no? How that makes it more accurate? I just don't understand. I can't get my head around that kind of thing. The directions and all that. He's on your six. But what if it's 6:10? How's it? No, it's just it's the clock. And I'm looking at the watch and it's digital. You can't get to work out. I couldn't get my head around it at all. And I feel the same with Russell Martin's tactics. I'm trying to find out if a player's left-footed or right-footed. I can't seem to get that information ever. If he's left-footed or right-footed, and then if he is, he seems to play on the opposite side from his looking at it, it seems to be a kind of. I think like if Bobby Shearer or Eric Caldwell was looking down on it, they would go, why is Rothwell needs to get to sit back in there? He needs to come further back there because the centre half back should be right in the middle of the left half back and the right half back and the full back. It's like two in front of two, which is the way we used to. I'm so old, but even my whole life has been. The midfield is everything. Midfield is congested. It's a car park. It's where there's the most aggression. There's the most thought. The tactical heartbeat is on the midfields. That's where the thinkers are and where the physical animals are. It's a midfield is just where it all happens. That's the brains of any football match. But the old WM system. I think I see the old players will be looking at it going, well, if they fellas Raskin and Diamande just push up. If they just get right up to the touchline, right up to the byline, well, that's where a winger should be. And then you've got two inside forwards and a centre forwards between them. And at the back, because the fullbacks used to be, they would come in and basically play like centre halves do today, whereas it was a left half back, centre half back, right half back, and it's all Jonathan Wilson inverting the pyramid stuff. The basics of how the players' numbering works out these days. But it seems that we're going back. Rothwell's kind of back the way, and then we've got the two eights out in the wings, kind of halfway up, and then you've got the two almost inside forwards going up, and it's a wee peak going up to Danilo, the centre forward, up the top. But we seem to be giving away. There's that Robin Osland film, was it the Triangle of Sadness? It's like the kind of diamond of depression, which is giving the whole. It's not the midfield, but it's right into the central part of the opposition's half, right into our half of the park, if you like. Something there's just nothing there. We're just leaving that wide open. I think that's what's doing a lot of people's nuts in, a lot of fans' nuts in, and that's probably why the manager or the head coach. Sorry, I'm going to keep saying that all season. On Saturday was like, you need the effort, you need the physical effort, and guys who can understand the system. So he's got right-footed players playing in left-sided positions, and I don't think it's always because he doesn't think Hefty or Ridvan are good enough, for example, to play at left back, so he'd rather put a really good right back in there. That's how desperate he is to find a good enough player for that position. I think sometimes it seems to be deliberate. There's a whole inversion thing going on. I don't understand it either, folks. That's the whole thing. So maybe it is just a system that's going to come about. Every single supporter or podcaster of the previous clubs he has coached has said it will take a while to kick in, but then when it does, it really works. I know we don't think we've got time at Rangers, but because we don't have time long term, because we've had so many years now of having a manager who doesn't work out in terms of the league anyway, we don't have time to chuck Russell Martin. If he's going to chuck the league in the first 2 or 3 months as Rangers manager, because he clearly doesn't care. As long as he can get us, he knows that the players are trying hard enough that they will eventually get there, and he's getting the players in through the door that know how to play his system or better suited to his system. So I feel as if it's certainly worth giving it a go. Lyle Cameron came across like a very nice young man in his presser today, which will instantly have him hated by some of our fans because that's you need to be a winner, son. You need to be a winner. But I'm only joking. I went for 4-1 as my scoreline on Jersnet last night. I was predicting 4-1 to, and Ben was predicting 3-0 as well because I think that would prove everything that Russell Martin did at the weekend and said at the weekend and what he said in the press conference today. That would prove it all is correct. It worked instantly. But I could just as easily see the amount of chances we have surrendered over the last 3 games to a whole lot of strikers, mostly with Greek names, who luckily couldn't hit a Kuzas with a banjo. It's frightening that if somebody is on, if an experienced championship striker like Matej Vidra is on the park tomorrow night, for example, we could concede, we could easily get beat 4-1 or 5-1 at home. This is what people are seeing. That's what's worrying people a lot. But I think there's a lot more to it than that. I think it's scar tissue and various other things that are nothing to do with Russell Martin, who has been appointed by people who do clearly know what they're doing, have a track record of that. We did all generally accept, however, that Plzen aren't as good as Panathinaikos, so I'm happy if that always proved to be true because Russell Martin has brought the whole thing to a head really early doors. I think it's a tactic. I think he's doing it on purpose just to shake the whole club up and shake the players up. And that was a really interesting press conference today. And I think he has taken the pressure off himself, not in the eyes of so many players, but a certain amount of fans won't forgive him ever. That's it. He's done. Until he wins the league, that's it. He'll be dead to them, but he's at a low simmer all the time. He's a very emotional guy. I think because he speaks in a kind of monotone voice, and as I say, he's got these a reputation for slightly esoteric belief systems in his private life, whatever. People might think he's a bit too wet, obviously for the Rangers job. But I think we've seen a real aggression from him, an aggression that he just lives off. That's just how he is. He might not have been emotional on Saturday. It's just because that's what he is. He's learned to be on it all the time. And I don't know why we wouldn't like this because we are, as a support, on a low simmer, on a low boil, just ready to start boiling over all the time as well these days. So all the best to Rangers against Victoria Plzen. I'll be there and I'll do you a wee... I'll try and make it nice and quick. I keep promising you this sub-half hour podcast, folks. We'll get you there eventually. I'll see you after the game tomorrow night, troops. But with what's kind of hopefully won't be a moribund Rangers podcast after a moribund performance. If it is, well then perhaps Russell Martin will be. That'll be him. He'll be done. But in the meantime, I'll just leave you with my merry band, not moribund, my merry band, Glenn Ponda and Debonair.